What were your parents completely wrong about? When my parents banned my friends from coming over after we stayed up gaming too loud, I just shrugged and moved our hangouts to Parker's place instead. But what my parents failed to take into account was that my friends had basically become free babysitters for my three younger siblings, two 7-year-old twins and a 9-year-old with the impulse control of caffeinated squirrels. The first Saturday without my friends, the twins decided our living room needed to be an ocean and spent 6 hours filling trash bags with water and duct taping them to every surface to create waves. They punctured them all simultaneously for what they called hurricane season and flooded the entire first floor while my parents were at their book club. The water seeped through the floorboards and destroyed Dad's home office ceiling tiles, which crashed onto his computer setup. My 9-year-old brother discovered he could make snow by putting styrofoam in the blender and created a winter wonderland throughout the entire house that took weeks to fully clean up. My parents kept finding styrofoam balls in their food for months afterward. The twins excavated what they called a treasure hunting zone in the backyard, using Dad's power tools they found in the garage. They dug trenches 3 feet deep across the entire lawn, looking for dinosaur bones, and hit a water line that geysered for 2 hours before the city could shut it off. Our water bill that month was $800, and the backyard looked like a World War I battlefield. I tried telling my parents that my friends actually kept the kids calm, but they insisted this was just an adjustment period. They need to learn to be by themselves without relying on teenagers, my mom said, while scrubbing permanent marker off the ceiling where the twins had drawn what they called upside-down world. My brother built a catapult in the driveway using the neighbor's trampoline that he dragged over and a seesaw he constructed from plywood and cinder blocks. He launched 40 water balloons filled with various substances, including maple syrup and glitter at passing cars, before someone called the cops. The officer who showed up got hit with a balloon full of chocolate sauce. The twins converted the bathroom into what they called a potion laboratory, using every cleaning product under the sink mixed together. The chemical reaction ate through the porcelain, and the toxic fumes required professional hazmat cleanup while we stayed in a hotel for 3 days. My brother figured out he could make indoor rain by poking holes in water bottles and taping them to the ceiling fans on full speed. He did this to every fan in the house and destroyed all the electronic. The insurance company refused to believe this was accidental damage and accused us of fraud. When I suggested again that maybe having my friends over would help, my dad actually yelled at me about enabling the situation. Your friends were clearly overstimulating them, and now they need to detox from all that chaos, he said, while using a snow shovel to remove the quicksand the twins made in the hallway, using cornstarch and water that had hardened into cement. The twins then discovered they could make lava by microwaving bars of soap. They microwaved 17 bars before the microwave literally exploded and embedded soap shrapnel in the walls that looked like a crime scene. My parents still refused to budge on the friend ban and actually installed cameras to make sure I wasn't sneaking anyone in, convinced that my friends had somehow taught them this destruction through osmosis. My brother created a tornado simulator in the garage using 3 box fans, a leaf blower, and every single item from the recycling bin, which distributed shredded paper and aluminum cans throughout the entire neighborhood. The Homeowners Association fined us $2,000 and threatened legal action, while my mom kept insisting this was just creative expression, finally coming out, since they weren't being influenced by video games anymore. But then, my brothers created the extreme home makeover and knocked down 2 interior walls with sledgehammers they found in the garage because they wanted an open concept, like on HGTV. The house was structurally compromised and we had to move out for 3 months while contractors fixed it. That's when Child Protective Services got involved because neighbors reported kids doing demolition work. My parents called an emergency family meeting where they were practically begging me to invite my friends back over immediately. We'll buy all the snacks you want and upgrade the gaming setup and never complain about noise again, my dad pleaded, while Mom was already texting other parents trying to arrange carpools to bring my friends here. But when I called Parker, he delivered the news that changed everything. Dude, we can't come back because Greg's dad is a lawyer and he says your house is flagged now, Parker said over the phone while my parents listened on speaker looking increasingly pale. What he said next made my stomach bottom out. Child Services opened a case. I sat there with the phone still in my hand while my parents stared at me with their mouths hanging open. Mom's face crumpled and tears started rolling down her cheeks while Dad went completely white like all the blood drained out of him at once. Parker kept talking on the speaker, but none of us were really listening anymore because those 3 words kept bouncing around in my head. My dad grabbed the phone from me and started asking Parker a bunch of questions, but Parker just kept saying his dad told him not to give us legal advice and hung up pretty quick after that. Within 10 minutes, Dad was pacing around the kitchen, calling every lawyer in town while Mom sat at the table with her head in her hands. He left voicemails at 6 different offices because it was already past 5 on a Friday and nobody was answering. Mom got up and started cleaning the house even though it was pointless since the insurance company already had hundreds of photos of all the damage from their claims investigations. She scrubbed the soap shrapnel marks on the kitchen walls while crying, and Dad kept dialing numbers from Google searches on his laptop. I went upstairs to check on my siblings who were weirdly quiet in their rooms for once. The twins were actually coloring in coloring books instead of on the walls, and my brother was reading a comic book on his bed. They could tell something bad was happening from all the yelling and crying downstairs. The next morning, a certified letter arrived that made everything real. The official notice from Child Protective Services said we had a scheduled home visit in exactly 72 hours to assess the safety of the home environment. My parents spent the entire Saturday arguing about whether to board up the damaged walls or leave them visible to show we were being honest about the repairs. Dad wanted to hide everything and pretend it was all fixed, while Mom said lying would make it worse. They went back and forth for hours while I tried to stay out of it and keep the kids occupied with a movie marathon in the basement. I tried explaining one more time that my friends had actually helped keep things calm, but they were too panicked to listen to anything I said. Dad kept insisting this was all just a big misunderstanding that would get cleared up once they explained the situation. Mom spent hours on her laptop Googling CPS home visit tips and reading horror stories about kids getting taken away, which just made her cry harder. Sunday passed in a blur of more cleaning and arguing and failed attempts to reach lawyers on the weekend. On Monday morning, we finally got a call back from a lawyer who said he didn't handle CPS cases, but gave us 3 names of lawyers who did. Dad called all 3, and only one called back that afternoon saying she could meet with us Tuesday, but it would be $500 just for the consultation. Then, on day 2 of our 72-hour countdown, we got a call from the actual CPS caseworker assigned to us. Her name was Melinda Abbott, and she sounded way calmer than I expected when she introduced herself on the phone. She explained she needed documentation of all the incidents, including medical records, police reports, insurance claims, and receipts for repairs. She asked about our current safety measures and whether the children had any special needs or medical conditions that needed to be considered. Mom frantically took notes while Dad kept trying to explain that this was all blown out of proportion and the kids were just creative. Melinda said she understood but still needed to do her assessment and would see us tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. The next day, Melinda arrived right on time in a gray sedan with a state government license plate. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with her hair in a neat bun and carrying a tablet and a thick folder. She noticed the cameras my parents had installed immediately and asked if they were new. Then she saw the boarded-up walls where my brothers had knocked them down and the industrial locks my parents had installed on every cabinet after the potion laboratory incident. She took photos of everything with her tablet while my siblings hid upstairs after my parents told them to stay in their rooms and be quiet. She walked through every room taking notes about the repairs in progress, the locks, the cameras, and asking questions about each incident. When she got to the garage and saw the damage from the tornado simulator, she just shook her head and kept typing on her tablet. After the walkthrough, she asked to interview each family member privately, starting with me. We sat in the living room while my parents waited in the kitchen, and she asked me to explain what had been happening from my perspective. I tried to be honest about how my friends had actually served as buffers for my siblings, without completely throwing my parents under the bus for their bad decision to ban them. I told her about the gaming nights and how the kids would sit and watch us play for hours instead of destroying things. She asked if I felt safe in the home and whether I thought my siblings were being properly supervised. Right in the middle of my answer, we heard a huge crash from upstairs, and my brother started yelling about making a zip line from his bedroom to the tree outside, using the ceiling fan as an anchor point. My parents scrambled up the stairs, while Melinda followed behind, still taking notes on her tablet, as my brother dangled from a rope made of bed sheets tied to the now broken ceiling fan. Dad had to boost him back through the window, while Mom untied the sheets, and Melinda documented the whole thing with photos. She interviewed my parents after that, and I could hear Dad's voice getting defensive through the door while Mom kept apologizing and crying. The next morning, my parents hired Cormac Mason, a family attorney who specialized in CPS cases, and charged $2,000 as a retainer. He came to the house that afternoon and reviewed all the documentation, including the police reports, insurance claims, and photos of the damage. He told us bluntly that the house conditions and lack of supervision were serious concerns that needed immediate addressing. He said the repeated incidents showed a pattern of inadequate supervision, and the structural damage alone could be grounds for removal, if not properly remediated. That same day, the HOA delivered their own bomb in the form of a formal notice, giving us 30 days to fix all property damage or face a lien on the house. The fines had reached $5,000 from all the incidents, and 3 different neighbors were threatening to sue for property value impacts from our disaster zone of a yard. Monday morning, I'm sitting in calculus when the classroom phone rings and the teacher waves me toward the door saying the counselor needs to see me immediately. Allison Rivera's office smells like vanilla candles, and she has this worried look on her face as she closes the door behind me and pulls out a thick folder with my name on it. She explains that as a mandated reporter, she has to document everything about our family situation and asks me to walk her through what's been happening at home. I tell her about the friend ban and how my siblings went completely wild without my friends around to keep them busy, and she takes notes on her computer while nodding and asking follow-up questions about supervision and safety. She slides a packet of resources across the desk about family support services and stress management techniques for teens dealing with chaotic home situations, and tells me her door is always open if I need to talk. The next day, Melinda shows up with an official interim safety plan that looks like a contract with about 50 different requirements my parents have to follow or risk having us removed from the home immediately. Every single chemical and tool has to be locked in cabinets with actual padlocks, and she brings a checklist showing which specific locks meet CPS standards and where to buy them. The supervision ratios mean one adult has to be within eyesight of my siblings at all times, which basically means my parents can't both leave a room simultaneously anymore. She hands them enrollment forms for mandatory after-school programs that run until 6 p.m. every weekday, and my dad's face goes white when he sees the monthly cost, but signs anyway. I pull Melinda aside in the hallway and ask if maybe my friends could come over with supervision to help keep the kids calm like they used to. But she shakes her head and explains that's not possible until we show at least 3 months of consistent compliance with the safety plan. The isolation from my friends feels like being underwater and not being able to breathe, but I understand she's just doing her job and trying to keep everyone safe. Thursday evening, my parents get their schedule for mandatory parenting classes that run every Tuesday and Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m. at the community center downtown. Dad starts complaining about missing work meetings and losing billable hours at his accounting firm, but Mom cuts him off and reminds him that keeping custody is worth more than any paycheck. Saturday, I bike over to Parker's house hoping to hang out like old times, but his mom answers the door and suggests maybe I shouldn't come over until our case gets resolved because they're worried about liability issues. Parker comes to the door looking miserable, and I can tell he feels terrible about the whole situation, but his parents are just trying to protect themselves from getting dragged into our mess. The after-school program calls Tuesday afternoon saying they're sending my brother home, and he can't come back because he tried to build what he called a rocket chair, using other kids' backpacks tied together with jump ropes attached to the jungle gym. The director meets my mom in the parking lot and hands her a typed letter saying my brother needs more specialized support than their program can provide, and suggests looking into therapeutic day programs instead. Wednesday morning, Cormac sits us down at the kitchen table and explains we need to document absolutely everything in detailed logs showing we're following the safety plan and making improvements. He hands me a notebook and tells me to start keeping an incident journal recording every small victory, like getting through an entire dinner without anyone destroying anything or throwing food. I write down things like, twins stayed in bed all night and brother didn't climb anything dangerous today, which feels stupid, but Cormac says judges love seeing progress documentation. That weekend, we spend 14 hours straight installing visual schedules with pictures showing every step of the daily routine. Heavy-duty locks on every cabinet and safety latches on windows that only open 4 inches. The twins actually get excited about the picture charts showing toothbrushing steps and getting dress sequences, and spend 20 minutes arranging the magnetic pictures in different orders. We mount fire extinguishers in every room, install door alarms that beep when opened, and put child safety covers on every electrical outlet, even though my siblings are way past the age where that should be necessary. Sunday afternoon, I'm taking out the trash when our next-door neighbor corners me by the garbage cans and starts yelling about the tornado simulator debris that destroyed his vegetable garden he'd been growing for 15 years. I apologize over and over, while he shows me photos on his phone of shredded aluminum cans embedded in his tomato plants and paper pulp covering his entire backyard like snow. He tells me he was one of 3 families who called CPS after seeing my brothers with sledgehammers knocking down walls, and I can't even blame him because I would have called too if I saw kids doing demolition. Monday morning, the principal calls my parents for an emergency meeting because my brother decided to create what he called a soda geyser experiment at the school, using Mentos and the cafeteria's soda fountain. He somehow rigged the machine to spray Diet Coke 20 feet across the lunchroom, soaking about 30 kids and destroying several ceiling tiles when the pressure built up too much. The principal hands them a 3-day suspension notice and explains she's required by law to send a disciplinary report to CPS as part of their mandatory reporting protocols, which means another mark against us in the case file. 2 days later, Melinda shows up for another home visit and watches the twins bounce off the walls for 20 minutes before pulling out a thick folder of pamphlets about occupational therapy and sensory evaluations. She spreads them across our kitchen table and starts circling phone numbers while explaining that my siblings might be seeking sensory input through all this destruction and need proper outlets for their energy instead of just punishment and restrictions. The twins are currently trying to build a fort out of couch cushions and kitchen chairs while my brother attempts to tie a rope from the ceiling fan to create what he calls a zip line, even though we confiscated all the rope last week. Melinda points to specific programs that specialize in high-energy kids and hands my mom a referral form for an evaluation center that could assess whether there's underlying sensory processing issues driving the chaos. My parents sit there looking at the price sheets for private therapy sessions that run $200 per hour per kid, with recommended twice-weekly sessions for at least 6 months. Dad's face gets redder with each page he flips through while Mom starts adding numbers on her phone calculator, and I can see her hands shaking when she gets to the total. The evaluation alone costs $1,500, and insurance won't cover it because it's considered developmental, not medical, and we've already maxed out our flexible spending account on the structural repairs. That night, I hear them fighting in their bedroom about money, with Dad yelling that between Cormac's retainer fee of $5,000, the HOA fines, the contractor bills, and now therapy costs, we're looking at bankruptcy. Mom screams back that he's ready to give up on our family and suggests selling the house, which makes Dad punch a hole in their bedroom wall that the twins discover the next morning and immediately try to make bigger. I start looking at job listings online and find a grocery store hiring part-time baggers for $12 an hour, which would at least help with some expenses. When I mention this to Allison during our weekly check-in at the school, she pulls out a worksheet about caregiver burnout and makes me list all my current responsibilities, which takes up 2 full pages. She helps me create a schedule that blocks out time for homework, the job application, family support, and something she calls personal time, which feels like a joke when my siblings require constant supervision. She writes me a recommendation letter for the job, but warns me that taking on too much could make things worse if my grades tank or I burn out completely. Meanwhile, Cormac calls my dad with news that he's been negotiating with the HOA board about our $5,000 fine balance. He gets them to agree to a payment plan where we pay $500 monthly, but they'll reduce the total by half if we meet specific cleanup milestones documented with photos every 2 weeks. The first milestone requires fixing the yard trenches and reseeding the grass within 10 days, or the deal is void, and they'll put a lien on the house. Dad immediately rents a rototiller, and we spend the entire weekend filling dirt into the trenches, while the twins actually help by carrying small buckets of topsoil. My brother gets assigned to spread grass seed with a push spreader, and for once he follows directions without trying to modify the equipment into some kind of weapon or experiment. Mom takes photos every hour showing our progress, and even the twins seem proud when they see the before and after pictures of sections they helped fix. We submit the documentation to the HOA and get confirmation that we passed the first milestone, which reduces our fine by $500. Allison calls my mom with information about a community center that runs free after-school programs for what they call high-spirited children, which is code for kids who destroy everything they touch. We sign up for a trial week and drive the kids there Monday afternoon, where they have a huge gym with climbing walls, trampolines, and foam pits specifically designed to let kids burn energy safely. The session goes pretty well, until the twins discover they can stuff foam blocks into the basketball hoop, and my brother tries to climb the emergency exit ladder to reach the skylight, but the staff handles it calmly and says they've seen worse. Tuesday night, my parents forget to lock the garage after bringing in groceries, and I wake up at 3 in the morning to find the twins outside with paintbrushes and 4 cans of house paint they found on the shelves. They've painted what they call rainbow roads across half the driveway, using every color we had left from the interior repairs, and my brother is trying to paint the neighbor's fence through the gaps in our shared boundary. I grab the hose and start spraying down the driveway while the paint is still wet and manage to get most of it off before it dries, though there's still faint streaks visible in daylight. We spend 3 hours scrubbing with mineral spirits and pressure washing until it looks mostly normal, and I make the kids promise not to tell anyone, which surprisingly they actually keep quiet about. 4 weeks after the initial CPS report, Melinda comes for our first official review meeting with a checklist 3 pages long. She inspects every room, tests all the locks, reviews our incident log, which now has 47 entries, and interviews each kid separately about how things are going. She writes in her report that she sees improvement in organization and safety measures, but emphasizes that consistency is absolutely critical, and any major incident could trigger escalated intervention, including possible removal. She schedules another review in 4 weeks and hands us a paper listing warning signs that would require immediate action, like any police involvement, emergency room visits, or property damage over $500. My grades start sliding from B's to C's, and I fail a chemistry test because I fell asleep studying after staying up all night making sure the twins didn't sneak out of their room again. Allison sees my progress report and calls me in to make a study plan that includes using study hall more effectively and dropping my elective art class to have an extra free period for homework. She acknowledges that something has to give right now, and grades can be recovered later, but family stability can't wait. Cormac schedules a prep meeting for our upcoming second CPS review and spends 2 hours coaching us on exactly what to say and how to present ourselves. He explains we need to own our mistakes completely without making excuses, show all our documentation in organized binders, and specifically request gradual reintroduction of peer support as part of the kids' social development. He says the key is showing humility and total compliance with every recommendation, even if we think it's stupid or unnecessary, because judges care more about cooperation than being right. The morning of the review meeting, I wake up at 5:30 and can't go back to sleep, so I start organizing all our documentation into color-coded folders. Mom's already in the kitchen making coffee with shaking hands, while Dad sits at the table reviewing his notes for the 10th time. The twins come downstairs asking for breakfast and actually sit quietly eating their cereal without trying to build anything out of the bowls. My brother watches cartoons at normal volume instead of maxing out the TV speakers like usual. We all pile into the van at 8:45 for the 9 o'clock meeting at the CPS office downtown. The waiting room has those uncomfortable plastic chairs and posters about child safety that make my stomach hurt to look at. Melinda calls us in right on time and leads us to a conference room with a long table and more uncomfortable chairs. She opens our case file, which is now 3 inches thick, and starts going through her checklist page by page. She notes every safety measure we've implemented and checks off completed requirements while my parents sit completely still. She pulls out photos from her recent home visit, showing all the locks, visual schedules, and organized spaces we've created. After 40 minutes of review, she closes the file and tells us she's recommending downgrading to voluntary in-home services. My mom starts crying with relief while Dad reaches over to squeeze my shoulder hard enough to leave marks. We still have requirements to meet, but the threat of removal is basically gone if we keep following the plan. 2 days later, the HOA inspector shows up with his clipboard and measuring tape to check our property compliance. He walks around the yard taking photos of the filled-in trenches and replanted grass that's starting to grow back. He measures the fence repairs and checks that all the paint has been removed from the driveway. Inside, he documents that the walls have been properly repaired and all structural damage has been fixed by licensed contractors. He marks us as meeting minimum standards on his form and agrees to the payment plan Dad negotiated with their board. We still owe $3,000 but can pay it over 12 months instead of all at once. That night, my parents asked me to sit down in the living room for what they call an important conversation. Dad starts by saying they were completely wrong about my friends and should have listened to me from the beginning. Mom adds that they understand now how much my friends helped with the kids and kept things under control. They officially lift the friend ban, but with new rules including keeping noise below certain levels and only having people over between noon and 9 p.m. They also want an adult home whenever friends visit, which isn't ideal, but beats having no friends at all. I text Parker immediately, and he responds with 20 exclamation points and says he'll tell the others. Monday morning, we drive the kids to their first day at the community center's after-school program for high-energy children. The director shows them the sensory room with trampolines and climbing walls where they can burn energy safely. The twins immediately gravitate toward the art station with washable everything, while my brother finds the building corner with foam blocks. I stay for the first hour to make sure they adjust okay and watch them actually follow the instructor's directions. By Friday, they've made it through the whole week with only 2 minor incidents involving glue and 1 timeout. The structure and constant activities seem to keep them focused on appropriate outlets instead of destruction. Parker texts me that night, asking if we can at least game online since coming over is still complicated. We set up a Discord server and get everyone online with headphones so there's no noise complaints possible. Hearing Greg's terrible jokes and Parker's commentary on everything feels like breathing again after holding my breath for months. We play for 3 hours straight, and my parents don't complain once about the quiet clicking of my keyboard. The twins even watch me play for a while without trying to grab the mouse or spill anything on the equipment. Over the next few weeks, our house develops completely new patterns that actually start feeling normal. Quiet hours from 7 to 9 a.m. and 8 to 10 p.m. become automatic with everyone respecting them. The visual schedules on every wall help the kids know what's happening next, without constant questions and meltdowns. Every chemical, tool, and potentially dangerous item stays locked in the new cabinet system Dad installed in the garage. Destruction incidents drop from multiple times daily to maybe twice a week, and those are usually minor, like drawing on paper instead of walls. The grocery store near our house posts a help wanted sign, and I apply immediately for a weekend position. The manager interviews me on the spot and offers me 20 hours between Saturday and Sunday at minimum wage. I start the next weekend bagging groceries and collecting carts from the parking lot in the heat. The work is boring, but having my own money and 8 hours away from home each weekend keeps me sane. I use my first paycheck to buy a better headset for gaming and put the rest in savings for emergencies. Cormac calls to say he's reducing our meetings to once a month since we're stable and following all requirements. He'll still be available if something urgent comes up, but doesn't need to supervise every detail anymore. My parents work out a payment plan for his fees, spreading them over 6 months, which still hurts financially but won't bankrupt us. They keep going to parenting classes every Tuesday and Thursday without complaining, even though Dad has to leave work early. Saturday afternoon, my brother has a meltdown about screen time when Mom says his 2 hours are up. Instead of yelling or giving in, she uses something called planned ignoring from their class and calmly continues making lunch. When he escalates by throwing the remote, Dad uses the redirection technique they learned and offers him a choice of 2 other activities. Within 10 minutes, he's building with Legos instead of screaming, and nobody had to raise their voice or threaten punishment. I watch from the doorway, actually impressed that they're using real strategies instead of just reacting with frustration. 3 months after that terrifying phone call about CPS, Melinda visits for another review and brings good news. She says if we maintain stability for 2 more months without major incidents, she'll recommend closing the case completely. We'd still have voluntary family maintenance services available, but no more mandatory visits or reports or constant monitoring. The relief on my parents' faces makes them look 10 years younger as they thank her repeatedly for her help and patience. I grab my phone that evening and text Parker about how Melinda might close our case soon if we keep things stable for 2 more months. He texts back immediately saying his parents have been talking about letting us hang out again once everything's official, and they'd even help watch the kids sometimes. The next Friday night, Mom pulls out Monopoly and Clue from the closet, instead of letting everyone scatter to their screens like usual. The twins actually sit still for 40 minutes moving their pieces around the board, while my brother builds hotels on the Park Place without trying to throw them at anyone. Dad lands on Boardwalk with 3 houses and pretends to cry about going bankrupt, which makes the twins laugh so hard they fall off their chairs. Nobody breaks anything or starts screaming, and we actually play 3 full games before bedtime with everyone taking turns and following the rules. Mom takes pictures of us all sitting around the table together and posts them on Facebook with some caption about family bonding that makes me roll my eyes but also feels kind of nice. 3 months after that phone call where Parker told us about the CPS case, I walk through our house and notice how different everything feels now. The visual schedules taped to every wall have become part of the background, like wallpaper. We don't even think about anymore. The cameras Dad installed are still recording, but now they just catch normal kid stuff like the twins doing homework at the kitchen table. The locked cabinets in the garage stay locked, but nobody tries to break into them anymore because the kids know their craft supplies are in the hall closet. The twins spend entire afternoons playing with the kinetic sand their occupational therapist recommended, making castles and roads without once trying to eat it or throw it. My brother discovered he loves building model airplanes with the supervision kit Dad bought him that has safety scissors and non-toxic glue. He follows the instructions step by step and hangs the finished planes from his ceiling with fishing line instead of launching them at cars. The sensory bins Mom made with rice and beans keep the twins busy for hours, just scooping and pouring without making huge messes. I bring home my report card with mostly B's and 1A in history, which is the best I've done since freshman year. Allison calls me to her office and says she's proud of how I've handled everything and shows me the recommendation letter she wrote for a local scholarship. The letter talks about resilience and family responsibility and overcoming challenges, which sounds way too formal, but might actually get me some money for college. She helps me fill out the application and says the committee loves stories about students who faced real problems and come out stronger. A thick envelope arrives from the HOA with official letterhead that makes Dad's hands shake as he opens it. But it's good news saying we've met all compliance requirements, and they're officially closing their complaint against us with no further action needed. The letter even mentions that several neighbors have commented on the improved appearance of our property and the lack of recent incidents. Dad frames the letter as a joke, but I catch him looking at it sometimes with this relieved expression, like he can't believe we actually made it through. Parker texts me, asking if he can come over with Greg and another friend for some gaming since his mom talked to my mom and everyone agreed it would be okay. They show up Saturday afternoon with their controllers and some snacks while my parents hover nervously in the kitchen. The twins sit on the floor watching us play Fortnite with their mouths open like they're watching a movie, completely quiet and focused. My brother asks questions about the game mechanics, and Parker actually explains everything patiently without getting annoyed. After 2 hours, my parents come in to check, and Mom actually thanks my friends for being so good with the kids. Dad offers to order pizza for everyone and doesn't even mention the noise when we cheer about winning a match. The final CPS review happens on a Tuesday morning with Melinda arriving right on time with her tablet and checklist. She walks through the house, noting all the safety measures still in place and the kids' calm behavior during her visit. She interviews each of us separately and together, asking about routines and support systems and how we handle conflicts now. At the end, she sits us all down in the living room and says she's recommending immediate case closure with the family successfully completing all requirements. She calls us one of her success stories and says she's genuinely impressed with the changes we've made in such a short time. Mom starts crying and hugging everyone, including Melinda, who looks uncomfortable but pats her back anyway before leaving with her final paperwork. 2 weeks later, my parents come home from their last parenting class, carrying certificates of completion that they wave around like diplomas. Dad jokes that it was harder than his MBA, but way more useful for real life, which makes Mom laugh and punch his arm. They actually frame both certificates and hang them in the hallway next to the kids' school photos, which is completely cheesy, but also kind of sweet. The instructor apparently said they were model students who really applied themselves and asked great questions every session. 6 months after this whole mess started, I look around at dinner and realize we're not perfect, but we're actually functioning like a real family now. The house has clear rules, posted everywhere that everyone follows without constant reminders or arguments about fairness. The kids have appropriate activities that channel their energy into building and creating, instead of destroying everything in sight. My parents use actual parenting strategies from their classes, instead of just yelling or giving up when things get hard. 3 weeks later, I'm sitting at my desk when I get an email from the scholarship committee that Allison recommended me for. I click it open and see the word, "Congratulations," at the top, and my hands start shaking as I read that they're awarding me the full amount for books and supplies for senior year. The letter says my essay about family resilience stood out among hundreds of applications, and that several committee members were moved by my honest portrayal of growth through crisis. I print it out and run downstairs to show my parents, who both get teary, and Dad actually gives me this huge bear hug, while Mom keeps saying she's proud of me. The scholarship covers $800 in books plus another $400 for supplies, which takes a huge weight off our finances after everything we've been through. That same week, Parker texts asking if he and Greg want to come over Saturday to teach my siblings this card game called Exploding Kittens, which is apparently perfect for kids. My parents immediately say yes and spend Friday afternoon cleaning the house and buying snacks like we're hosting royalty or something. When Parker and Greg show up, the twins actually sit quietly on the floor watching them set up the game instead of trying to eat the cards or throw them at the ceiling fan. My brother asks a million questions about the rules, but Parker explains everything patiently and even lets him be on his team for the first round. After an hour of playing, Greg mentions that my brothers are actually pretty cool when they're not destroying property, and Parker agrees they're way more fun than his little cousins. The twins learn the game so fast, they beat us in the third round and do this victory dance that makes everyone laugh instead of cringe. My friends start coming over every other Saturday for game afternoons, and my siblings look forward to it all week, counting down days on their visual schedule. Parker brings different games each time and teaches them strategy, while Greg shows them card tricks that keep them entertained without any destruction involved. One afternoon, while we're all playing Uno, I watch my family and friends together and realize something important about this whole mess. My parents being completely wrong about my friends being a bad influence led to 6 months of absolute chaos that nearly tore our family apart. But that chaos forced us to get the help we desperately needed through CPS intervention, mandatory parenting classes, and actual structure in our home. Without hitting rock bottom with the house destruction and legal threats, my parents would have kept pretending everything was fine while the kids got more out of control. The crisis made them face reality and learn real parenting skills instead of just hoping things would work out on their own. Now we live differently, with locks on every cabinet and visual schedules on every wall, but it's just part of our normal routine. The twins check their picture charts every morning to see what's happening that day and follow the steps without needing constant reminders. My brother channels his energy into supervised building projects in the garage, where he makes things with actual plans instead of random destruction. The house stays mostly intact, with destruction limited to craft projects at the kitchen table, with newspapers spread out underneath. Friends come and go, without anyone worrying about noise or late nights, because my parents finally understand they actually help maintain peace. Looking around our living room at my friends teaching my siblings a new card game, while my parents watch from the kitchen with actual smiles, I realize sometimes being completely wrong is the only way to finally get things right. Thanks for exploring all these questions with me today. It's been a pretty curious little journey to share together. Until next time, take care. Subscribe for more content like this.